AI, artificial intelligence, everyone's talking about it. Is it a threat or an opportunity?
Convince them about your point of view. That is going to continue to have value.
This is Amir Qureshi. Welcome to our podcast. Shahriyar, how are you today?
Pretty good. I'm in Islamabad. It's raining. What's not to like?
Well, it's probably the best city in Pakistan. I'm a bit biased, having lived here on and off for many years. Certainly better than where you come from, Karachi.
Yes, that could be a whole podcast by itself. I think, and maybe one of the future.
How do you find living in Karachi? I know you've not lived there forever.
Well, now I've been there about 10 years, and I think that there are a lot of infrastructure issues that you don't see in some of the other cities in Pakistan, Lahore or Islamabad, and I think that the size of the city and the way it's governed in terms of the various municipal corporations, because different corporations have ownership of different parts of the city, and there's perhaps a lack of coordination because the roads get dug up, then they get done, then they get dug up again, and so this is like a never-ending cycle. So yeah, I think it's a challenge. A lot of the issues that we have in Karachi you don't see in Islamabad or in Lahore or some of the other cities. Water, poor roads,
Well, there's always an option, move to Islamabad. All your problems will be solved until some other challenge emerges. So our topic that we're going to take a deep dive into today's podcast is AI, artificial intelligence. Everyone's talking about it. Is it a threat or an opportunity? Where do you fall in this spectrum, threat or opportunity?
It's such a huge topic now, and has had, it's got so much going for it globally in terms of the conversation and the kind of developments that are happening in the different companies, and how pervasive it's becoming. That it's kind of difficult to kind of put it in one specific bucket with a threat. I would say that certainly for a lot of people, some jobs or some kinds of jobs, a lot of the rote jobs and the kind of routine jobs may be taken over by AI at some point, if not today, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 years down the road. So I think as organizations identify those jobs and say, well, these 500 people doing this job will, not be doing it in 2 years. I think that, they need to figure out what those 500 people are going to do, because you can't just keep laying people off.
So we're going to talk about AI from very, different lenses. We'll look at it from the company point of view. We'll look at what it means for people working in those organizations. But let's talk about the first $4 trillion company in the world. It's amazing. Yeah. And this company is not company which manufactures something. It's not selling iPhones or anything like that. It's a company that until a few years ago we had not heard of. NVIDIA, $4 trillion, and it's an AI company.
Right, and the NVIDIA chip that they make, the GPU that they make is being used around the world. Hence the massive growth and valuation. Right now, I think I was looking at the numbers this morning. I think they're trading at a multiple of a PE multiple of over 50. Which is obviously a high growth multiple. None of the other tech companies are even close to that kind of a multiple.
Yes.
Other than Tesla, which is, we don't know why that's trading at that
such
sort of multiple. Yeah, the fundamentals don't support it. But yeah, $4 trillion, that's bigger than most countries' economies, so it's, it's been a huge run for them. And I think only in the last 3 years, or even less than 3 years, where they've gone from a stock price of, whatever to now over $170. And massive, even year to date, they're up like 23%.
Yes.
So it's just, a juggernaut that's rolling on. And I think what they're powering obviously is the different AIs that the other company is doing, whether it's Gemini or whether it's ChatGPT or I guess DeepSeek has more, the Chinese chips. I don't think NVIDIA is providing them those chips. But But yeah, so it's a fantastic story, and I think it's going to probably continue to roll like that for another few years.
And a lot of people are confused when we talk about AI. It means different things to different people. Everyone knows about ChatGPT or Gemini, like you mentioned, and yes, we can now do our internet searches much more quickly, and they can be much more targeted. But AI is much, much bigger than any of these things that we're talking about. It's having a huge impact. A lot of things which are powered by AI we don't even know. So for example, every time you pick up your phone, you have facial recognition. That's powered by AI. When you're passing through an airport and your face is recognized, if you're going through one of those automated lanes, that's all AI. Everything is being effectively, either directly or indirectly, there is some element of AI. Right. But how do you think it's going to impact on people working in organizations, different professions, and so on? And let's talk about some specific professions and go one by one. I'm curious to know what it's going to do to the legal profession. I know the legal profession in Pakistan probably still is in the dark ages. They carry around those big registers and files. What do you think this is going to do to them?
It's interesting because, again, there's a lot of routine work in terms of, when a legal brief is being prepared or a legal case is being prepared, in terms of searching for the relevant precedent and things like that. And I think eventually, particularly in markets where a lot of this data is already digitized, it's going to be very easy for AI to pull up all of these things. So all these young lawyers who are spending like nights at the office, preparing these briefs for the senior lawyers, a lot of them will now, that work will go away eventually.
So there's going to be a lot of automation. There's going to be a lot of the menial tasks, research, compiling files, and everything can all be done. Right. So if that's all the chances are you could potentially be out of a job.
That's true, and the scariest thing about AI, and I was listening to somebody talk about this, is that it is the first tool that humanity has invented, which at some point in its development can become completely independent of humankind, and make its own decisions and do things on its own. So far, everything we've created, whether it's the cell phones or the atom bomb or whatever, they can't go off and do stuff on their own. They can't decide to, adopt a certain course of action. But eventually AI can. So it can decide to do X, Y, Z, and it's not necessarily that it'll decide to like bomb the whole planet and get rid of everybody. But it'll be an agent by itself, so it'll have agency. And that's the most frightening thing, which is where you need the guardrails of good governance and legislation, etc., to be able to kind of make sure that's 5 years down the road, it's not suddenly doing things on their own.
Yes, I think governance of AI is quite an important topic, and we will dive into that in a few minutes. But let's talk about some other professions that may potentially face challenges once AI is sort of brought in. Accounting, my own profession. I think if all you do is match, purchase vouchers with invoices, I think your days are limited. Maybe in Pakistan you can have that kind of a role for another 12 months, 18 months, but the bots are already in place which can do all of this matching, approve things for payment. So I think any of the menial tasks, any of the routine tasks, the basic debits and credits, I think if that's all you do, then you have to sort of look for some other things to do. What about doctors? You think doctors think they're very special? What do you think AI is going to do to them?
Well, I think since the advent of Google, I think we're all becoming semi-doctors, and which is actually a problem for a lot of doctors. I was reading that, people show up with symptoms and, they're telling the doctor what they think it is.
Yes.
And I think that, that's a dangerous place to be in, because there's a lot of junk out there. Where people selling whatever, use lemon juice to live to 100 years old or whatever it is.
Yes, it's actually lemon, honey, and ginger. That's to 100 years.
Yeah. So there you go. So you've been reading that stuff too. But the point is that this now, it'll become even more so. So people may start to self-medicate without even talking to the doctors.
Yes.
And that could be dangerous, because then the doctors would have to, a lot of times, undo
Yes.
You know, what the damage that people have done by themselves, trusting the AI to tell the truth. And that's another area that, you know.
And I think in terms of medicine, where the AI seems to be having a huge impact is in terms of, for example, analyzing X-rays, MRI reports. It can generate those reports. And research has found that they are actually more accurate in picking up things that doctors were actually missing. So 2 to 3% increase in the accuracy since AI has got involved in terms of understanding or reading X-rays. So that's going to have an impact. The other people who are being affected by AI is academia. I mean, these professors who sit there and do nothing and pretend to be important. Sorry, maybe some professors are watching. I shouldn't be that rude, but they do pretend, right? They do a lot of work. They publish papers. Now you can effectively write a paper in a matter of minutes. Now it may not be as good as what a professor would write, but a lot of this research is going to change inherently in nature. Then, of course, if the professors are doing it, so are the students. They can generate an assignment in a matter of minutes. And I think some of the schools are finding it very challenging, where the kids are using AI to do their homework, their assignments, and the teachers are not at a level where they can actually detect that, or they don't have the technology as yet. The West is far more advanced in terms of detecting AI and the influence of AI on your academic work, but Pakistan is still lagging behind. So that's another profession I think that's going to be.
You know, it's interesting you talk about that, because what that might do, so what's happened in the teaching profession generally, and especially in higher education, is that professors now are there more for publishing stuff than teaching the students.
Yes.
So what this might do is perhaps bring more of a focus back for the professors, or their business models that these universities have, that you know publish or perish is the kind of the model that they've followed for decades, is now say, well, no, I mean, you know, you want tenure or whatever it is, it's not just based on having published like 20 different things. You know, now you've got to teach classes also,
yes.
you know, more than you've been doing. So I think it may actually result in more actual education in class, you know, rather than just the professor focusing on publishing his papers or catching the students who are like using AI to do their assignments.
And I think with my limited experience as an academic, when I used to teach at LUMS, we used to have this constant debate. The professors were always reminding me that I did not have a PhD, which I still don't have. But I used to tell them that I have a PhD in real life, and I've worked on more real life projects than they're ever going to be able to do in their entire lives. As a result of the sort of training and upbringing I'd had, especially in Australia, my teaching skills were far better than many of the other professors who were much better at research. And that generated a lot of goodwill amongst the students. The students liked the style of teaching, the interactivity, the confidence. I could do a debit and a credit live in front of a studio audience. The professors struggled to do that. They had to teach according to what the book said. So I think more and more students want that type of teaching, that type of interactivity, which, as you're saying, the academics will have to adapt rather than sitting behind their desks and doing research, because that's going to become secondary.
Yeah, because the research is going, you know, can be done in a day, you know, that would normally take them a month.
Exactly. So. And another profession, I mean, a few years ago when someone asked, you know, what do you want your children to pursue in terms of university education, everyone said IT. In Pakistan particularly, it was IT. Even if you didn't understand what the term meant, everyone was going in that direction. How do you think AI is going to change this IT focus?
Well, I think one of the things that's already starting to happen, based on whatever I've read about a lot of the tech companies in the US, the larger companies, is that the importance of coding is starting to decline. Because many of the things that previously required somebody to code, now AI can start doing. And remember that these sort of LLMs, or these large language models, are only a couple of years old. You know, it's not as if they've been around for 20 years. I mean, so they're like they're infants in terms of, you know, if you were to compare their development to human beings, they're actually just infants. And they're already starting to have that kind of an impact on specific professions. So as they become more complex, as they, you know, they develop their own individual skills and personalities, you know, talking about it as a person, a lot of these things where, you know, yeah, I mean, you still might need people who are doing like systems maintenance and stuff, but as equipment becomes better and better quality, I think that these guys, you know, coders and basic programmers and stuff, they're going to have to sort of, again, reskill themselves into something else.
So if I was a young person, which I'm not, but if I was much younger, I'd be sitting back and thinking, what am I going to do in the next 20, 30 years? By the time I get to retirement age or close to retirement age, the world would have changed so much. How do I keep up my skill set? How do you ensure that I remain relevant, and I continue to have opportunities to work? What are some of the things that, or what are the skills that are not going to change in the next, say, 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think that many of the things that traditionally used to be labeled soft skills, I hate that term, but
yes, I'm not a fan of soft skills.
I don't like that term. These are not soft skills. They're as hard and core to your development as knowing how to like screw a nut or whatever it is that the things like good communication. If you can stand up in front of an audience of 10, 20, 100, 50 people and tell them a story and convince them about your point of view, that is going to continue to have value. Sort of good storytellers are going to continue to have value. Creative thinking, analytical thinking, these are things that are going to be difficult for these large language models to get to. Independent creativity. Yes, I can use the model to make an ad now or a digital ad or whatever. But at the end of the day, somebody has to give it that input to say that, here's what it should look like and that, this guy should enter stage left or whatever it is. They can't do that on their own. So connecting what is required in the human world with the technology available to do things, you're going to need people for that, and you're going to need those skills. Yeah. And what do people do? Again, upskill, learn constantly, read as much as you can. There are millions of free resources available now.
Yes, especially to do with AI.
Especially to do with AI. The other thing I would encourage people to do, and this is something that perhaps we might do a separate podcast on one of these days, is the importance of actually reading. Because particularly in Pakistan, I think reading has become it's almost vanished. Yes. Most people, if they read, I do some work with educational institutions. I go and talk to kids, in these classes, especially graduating classes and all. And one of the questions I always ask is, who read a book in the last 3 months? And I mean, in an audience of 50 or 60 kids, usually there's 1 or 2 who would, raise their hand.
Something which needs to be encouraged, and the students are so busy, I suppose, keeping up with their academic reading that they don't get to read anything else. But you're absolutely right. Reading is essential. But I was attending a seminar by one of the Harvard professors in Dubai about a year or so ago, and he put up a slide which was absolutely fascinating, and it was a quote from Jeff Bezos, which said something along the lines of, most people spend 70% of their time thinking about 30% of the things that are going to change from a technology point of view. Okay. They said we spend 70% of our time focused on things that are not going to change. So these basic skills that we're talking about, whether it's your creative thinking, critical thinking, communication, storytelling, these skills. So, Shehryar, one of the problems with being a consultant, trainer, and all the things that I do is you're always pitching for work. So recently I put in a proposal for a company, and I won't mention the name or the sector in case they get embarrassed, but I put in this huge proposal about training them and about developing a strategy for AI, how the organizations should prepare for the introduction of AI, where it would add value, then how to bring about the change amongst its team. But unfortunately, not a very enlightened HR manager said, we don't really want to know anything about strategy or change management, just teach us how to use ChatGPT or Gemini. What do you think about that little story and the importance of having a strategy to do with AI and the whole change management piece that companies must undertake if they're serious about bringing about this change?
No, that's an excellent point. That I think most corporations in Pakistan are probably in a similar situation where they've heard of this magic thing called AI, And they say, well, let's do something about it. And they say, well, what should we do? And let's figure out how to use it. You know, so it's very much like a, you know, what's the absolute front end of what's happening.
Yep.
You know, just the basic stuff, you know, so that if I need to make a presentation for my boss, I can just put it in there and the presentation spits itself out. You know, so it's literally at that level for most companies. Very few companies are actually trying to start incorporating it into their actual operations.
Yep.
You know, in one of our member companies, and again, I won't name them right now, but they are fairly further ahead as far as that is concerned. They've started to integrate AI into their supply chain and into their warehousing and you know, starting to use that. But they're a subsidiary of a foreign corporation. So it's interesting that you mentioned that. Most companies, what they're doing right now is because they've heard of this thing called AI and they want to kind of sort of figure out what it is. So they're looking to see, well, okay, let's, you know, just somebody come in and, you know, for a half a day and teach us the basics, how to use ChatGPT. If I want to make a presentation for my boss, you know,
Yes,
I can just dump it in there and it spits out the presentation and here we go, and the boss says, great. So it's really basic stuff, you know, the kind of more administrative and housekeeping type work than actual work that would increase productivity or improve their operations. One of our member companies, which is a subsidiary of a foreign organization, they have actually started to incorporate this over the last sort of, I would say, 12 to 16 months into some of their operations, into their warehousing, perhaps into their supply chains as well. But it's generally, there is no such incorporation right now of this because most of them don't even have a strategy. They don't understand what they need to do or how their operations can potentially be affected by this. So it's sort of remote right now for most people.
Yes, although one advantage we have here in Pakistan is that we don't have to do anything from scratch. It's already being done somewhere else in the world. So companies, for example, in the oil and gas sector, they could learn from what international companies are doing, how they're reinventing themselves, how, for example, companies are now much more focused on renewables as opposed to the traditional oil and gas. So there is a lot that we could just learn from observing what other companies are doing internationally. But having a strategy to incorporate AI into your business operation is absolutely critical, and I think that's the place to start, and this is a point that many companies are not yet picking up on. Since we're talking about the macro level, the higher level stuff, let's talk about another important piece, which is the governance of AI. I mean, AI is everywhere. It's affecting companies, individuals, and of course entire countries as well. So where do you think we should start thinking about governance of AI? What is the first place?
I think, you know, it needs to be much larger than individual countries. I mean, we need to talk about global forums where, you know, large groups of companies, countries can get together and talk about this, whether it's the EU or it's, you know, the US sort of getting involved in that, or, you know, China and Japan, the larger economies, and where most of the use would be, at least in the first few years of this. Because obviously countries like Pakistan are sort of fairly downstream of a lot of the developments here. So it will take, you know, a few years before it becomes really serious in our markets. So I think that it has to be more at global forums. The United Nations, for example, they need to take something, take a deep and hard look at what this is going to do to the world in the next 5 or 10 years and provide those guardrails. You know, just like there was a lot of consensus many years ago on genetic testing and genetic modifications.
Yep.
You know, it's not that easy for somebody to say, okay, you know, I'm going to do X, Y, Z in my little laboratory here. There's a lot of governance around that. So this will require a similar level of governance, because there, you know, you could, if you were unethical about it, you could tweak the human genome and, you know, work on things like that. So that, you know, there was a sort of good, strong guardrails around that. You're going to need similar things for this, because the potential for something like AI to have an impact across the world and you know, in very significant ways is huge. So
yeah. So there's a whole global level. Then, of course, countries need to have governance strategies in place in as far as the whole AI thing is concerned. And then if we come one level below that, then there's the entire companies, organizations that need to be thinking about governance of AI. I mean, the boards of directors need to take ownership and responsibility. They cannot just leave it to the management. And then, of course, there are individuals as well. So we're looking at a multi-tiered governance issue, I suppose. And it's not something that we have total control over. As you're saying, it's a worldwide phenomena, worldwide problem that we need to solve together, because changes are just going to continue to happen at this pace.
Right. And I think when you talk about the boards, I think that, and since you are part of a lot of the director trainings for boards as well, I think there needs to be far more emphasis on the implications of AI in the director training program. So as you revise the curriculum for that, I think this needs to be a big part of it and not just one of the modules that you do in like 2 hours and you're done.
And I think one of the things that we keep re-emphasizing, especially to the elders, and let's be very specific, I suppose, the typical director in Pakistan is somewhere between mid-60s to maybe late 70s, and it's usually a he. He's been to Karachi Grammar School, he's a member of Sindh Club or Punjab Club, and as far as he's concerned, this AI thing is just some, new technology he doesn't really want to understand. Now, one of the things we encourage them to do is learn to take advice from the younger generation, because the next AI genius is probably going to be around 27, 28 years of age. He's going to know a lot more about this particular subject, and we as directors, the older generation, have to be comfortable taking advice from these people. And this is a change in mindset that's required, not just in Pakistan, but in other countries as well. But here, I think we need to realize that the young people, they do know something about this stuff.
That's true. And I think that applies probably to a number of other areas as well in general, where once I said, I'm the, XYZ and I've got 30 years of experience doing this. Well, a lot of people have 1 year's experience times 30.
Yes.
So that they don't really have 30 years experience. And in my interactions with a lot of these more senior people, what I've found is they seem to be living really in the past. Back in my day, it used to be done like this and this, that, and the other, and we were fine. I mean, this kind of defensive thinking. I think that it's extremely dangerous for organizations. Maybe there needs to be an age limit on boards. I don't know.
Well, this is the interesting thing. So a couple of little stories I want to share. So I exercise a lot, as you know. I'm addicted to exercise. And so one day I was preparing for one of my big runs, and somebody said, "What are you training for?" And I said, "I'm training for old age," because I don't know what else to do. When I get old, I still want to be able to walk. But if you look around the world, the President of the United States is touching 80. The senior leadership, even our own country, is well into their 70s.
Right.
So as I used to think that, at this stage of my life, maybe I'm getting old a bit, but really I still have close to 20 years before I can, be a president of a country like the United States. So age doesn't seem to be a barrier anymore. Maybe it's a mindset rather than a number that we are talking about.
I think it's sort of, age capture. Elite capture is a term that we use a lot, but I think this thing where the older and more sort of more wealthier people in every country have sort of monopolized positions of power. They don't let younger people come in because it requires a lifetime of connections and contacts to be part of that whole electoral process. It needs a lot of money. In some countries not so much, but in most countries, especially countries like Pakistan, you need to have the money to be able to spend to get there. Generally 30-year-olds don't have that that kind, unless there's some family dynasty behind.
Although you've
that.
seen some amazing examples in the United States with the mayor for New York, very young person elected with a very small budget, not your typical mayor for New York. So let's talk a little bit more about AI and everything. How do you think as a young person, if I am working in an organization, how can I use AI to improve the quality of my work on a day-to-day basis? Just some simple tips that you personally may have experienced.
Well, I think the first thing is, if you're, let's assuming at a relatively junior position and you don't have much agency over what you're supposed to do, but you've been given a set of tasks and say, every day you have to do this. So first figure out, how AI can actually help you. That if I have to do these 6 things every day or every week or every month or whatever it is, so what are those things that I can use AI for to improve it? And then learn that skill on your own also. I mean, the company may provide some, again, capacity building or training in that area, but do it on your own. It's not that difficult.
Yes.
I mean, I've played around with it and used it to, say, okay, I want to write a book doing this, that, and the other, and 100 pages, I gave it a certain thing, and it churned out a 100-page book. I didn't do anything with it, it's just sitting on my laptop. But the point is that, again, the onus of learning this is on the person himself. So those of us, those young people and professionals who are proactive about it, who want to learn new things, and things that will actually help them in their work, then they can actually, say, okay, so this takes me 2 days every week, but using AI, now this takes me half a day, or whatever it is. And then they can go on to other things and then ask for more responsibility and more jobs. So that way they stand out.
So there's a lot of, and I suppose, let's be very specific. In Pakistan, many people have difficulty writing or editing documents. English isn't always someone's preferred language. So AI gives you a great opportunity. For example, you can draft a document, you can have it edited, it can correct anything, even simple grammatical mistakes, where the commas are placed, all of that stuff. I mean, it can really help you and save time. Mm-hmm. The other thing, as you're correctly saying, is up to us as individuals to see how we can utilize it. But again, keep in mind that AI is still developing, it's evolving, and lots of things that you get out of it are not accurate. Mm-hmm. So for example, ChatGPT is notorious for giving references which don't actually exist. And this was told to me by one of my friends before I was about to submit what may have been an academic paper utilizing ChatGPT. And when I checked the references, the references did not exist. So we have to realize it's still a work in progress. There's a lot of limitations, but it can save you a lot of time. And how much do you use AI in your own day-to-day work? I'm keen to know.
Not that much, because at this point at least, the nature of the work that we do, it does not lend itself much to that. Except for in the area of training, because one of our core functions at PIP is technical trainings. And what we've started to do is to incorporate specific AI programs, again, very basic level programs, into our training rosters. And some of the organizations that that are our members have gone through those trainings, and some are, lined up for those. But again, it's basic level. At our own, the work that we do, we may use some search functions to find good training programs and trainers and things like that. But again, the nature of our work, doesn't involve that much AI at this point. If the nature of our work changes, or we add other things into our portfolio at some point in time, certainly I think that we would. But the companies we represent and who are our member organizations, all of the oil and gas companies, certainly in their operations, there are huge applications which they're only just starting to kind of think about.
Yeah, well, I've been using it a lot, and apart from, I suppose, doing basic level research, preparing some marketing material, notes and stuff for workshops, or sometimes helping me to write, I was asked to present a speech to a graduating class in Dubai recently. And I had a basic idea in mind of what I wanted to say, but I wanted some really nice quotes. Since it was Dubai, I wanted a quote from the ruler of Dubai. I wanted to plug in a quote from Roger Federer, one of my all-time favorite people. Yeah, he's just so good, such a nice guy and such a great player. So AI was able to craft a perfect speech with the message that I gave, and of course I put my own touches to it, but I got the right quote from Sheikh Mohammed, I got the right quote from Roger Federer, all in a space of about 20-25 minutes. Now that sort of thing would have probably taken me 2 or 3 hours previously. So you can save a lot of time through AI. But let's wrap up. I think what we've talked about in this episode is the need for individuals to upskill themselves as far as learning about AI, the new technology. And we've also talked about the fact that companies need a strategy. You can't just all of a sudden expect that all your employees will adopt this new technology. Because don't forget, some people have been doing the same thing for 20 years. We've talked about the need for the governance at both the global levels, the national level, and then coming down to the corporate level and so on. And so lots of things we've touched on, but let's just re-emphasize the need for the skills that are not going to change that you talked about.
Right, but just before that, you mentioned Roger Federer, so I saw this mug which said, always be yourself. Unless you can be Roger Federer, then be Federer.
Yes, I wish I could be Roger Federer.
Yeah, so I think it just speaks to the kind of person he is, not necessarily just because he was a great tennis player, but just the person. I don't know if you've heard that speech that he gave at this college.
Yes.
Their graduating speech. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
And I think one of the things that really upsets Novak is he's won more championships, he's got more Grand Slams, but nobody talks about him as much as we still talk about him.
So and coming back to why, and you talked about the kind of skills that are required. So it's not just enough that he was a fantastic tennis player.
Yep.
He was a great communicator. He connected well with people. Whatever story he was telling was fantastic. So those were the things that we talk about, the skill sets that people will always need. He was possibly the greatest tennis player of all time, possibly, at least in the top 3. But he still he's not remembered only for the tennis, because there are others. What differentiated him? His communication skills, his ability to connect with people. Right?
Yes, and I think that's a nice way to sum up. You can be a professional, and there's lots of accountants, lots of lawyers around the world, but very few have the sort of communication skills that Roger Federer has, or the elite amongst their professions have. And I think that's what we're highlighting. So it's been wonderful having this conversation. Look forward to seeing you next time we get together.
Same. It was great.
Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time.